Welcome to Stranger Encounters. This is Tommy Salmons. Today my guest is the host of Free Man Beyond the Wall, author of Freedom Through Memedom and The Kids Are Not All Right. Both are available for crypto at freemanbeyondthewall.com or at Amazon for your fiat currency. He's also one of my favorite freedom-loving voluntarists and capped libertarians, Mance Rayder. Hey, Mance, what's up?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me today, Tommy. I appreciate it. On this July 4th.
July 4th. This won't be released until September, but yeah, we are on July 4th celebrating our semi-independence from King George. I guess we're still mad at him. I saw a few memes about King George earlier.
We had a good 5 years of freedom after the revolution, and then that Constitution came along and fucked it all up.
Yeah, no joke, guys. Why couldn't we just embrace the Articles of Confederation?
Yeah, It was hard for a nation to do business under them. It was hard to build a banking system under them. So,
Yeah, well, Hamilton and all his ideas.
He had some good ideas, but that was probably the worst one. Well, the Electoral College wasn't bad. The Supreme Court's the only thing that saved us in the last. The Supreme Court's the only thing that saved us in the last 20 years from having our heads cut off. So,
well, and they're not even supposed to do anything other than issue opinions. So here we go.
But the thing is, if you understand what Hamilton believed about the Supreme Court is he knew that government is inherently corrupt. And his belief was that the Supreme Court could be a buffer against, he knew there was always going to be corruption. He thought that the Supreme Court would be a buffer against, the worst elements taking over. That's another reason why he came up with the Electoral College, was because he knew that if it wasn't for the Electoral College, only New York and Philadelphia would be electing a president. And now it would be New York City and Los Angeles. The count, I think it's Orange County, Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. Those two would be electing a president if we didn't have an Electoral College. So Hamilton understood the inherent corruption of government, and I thank him for a couple things, but yeah, man, that banking, that central banking stuff, and wanting a central bank really killed us.
Honestly, I wasn't even anti-Hamilton until I heard Michael Malice argue his point.
No, it's no Malice. The points that Malice makes, if you really listen to what he's saying about how Hamilton really understood how it was going to be corrupt, how inherently corrupt government was, that he put in a couple good stops there to keep it from going completely overboard. I mean, the reason you see a lot of corruption in other governments, and the way how it gets so far, is not having the Electoral College or the Supreme Court to keep tyrants from taking over, basically. So the Supreme Court does act as a tyrant in many ways, but they also they're the reason why certain states and certain people, they're the reason why I still probably have guns without being, an out and out felon. So, the states are helping too. I mean, some states do a good job of fighting, but I mean, even the state I'm in Georgia, as conservative as people think we are. I mean, I live in Atlanta. Do you really think Atlanta's that conservative? So. You know what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm a truck driver, and the best thing about Atlanta, as far as I'm concerned, is their highway system. You deal with a lot less traffic than a lot of other cities do.
Holy shit! Really?
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Wow.
Y'all's highway system is much better than most of the cities in the United States.
The 280.
The
285 bypass really helps a lot, but it helps you guys. It doesn't help us. It clogs the shit. It clogs the shit out of our roads. But especially since I live 600 feet away from 285, so I'm always on 285, and I'm like, can you get that thing out of my way? I know I know you're feeding me. I know that you're getting the food to the friggin' supermarket, but get the hell out of the way. Oh man.
True, man. Yeah, no, true. I can see how that could be a problem.
My brother's
I like the fact that
so, you know. My brother's a trucker, so you know.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So.
Okay. Well, yeah. No. Like my thing about Atlanta is you have. I mean, every highway going through the city is 4 or 5 lanes, and you don't have that in other cities. It's horrible. My least favorite city to drive in is Dallas, and now that I'm home every weekend and I'm driving regionally, I'm in Dallas every week, and I hate it. I'm just like, oh, get me out of this place, man. This is like the worst thing ever. So
never been there. I can't comment on it. I'll take your word.
Oh, those guys, man. I don't think there's nothing nice to say about whoever designed their highway system. It's the worst system in the United States. Chicago's pretty bad. Chicago can get pretty bad. LA can get pretty bad, but Dallas is by far my least favorite place to drive. I'd probably put New York, the city up there if it wasn't for getting paid $100 just to cross the bridge. That kind of makes up for it. It's like, okay, I'm getting paid just to go here. So, yeah, we can handle that. Dallas, they should at least give me.
You got paid an extra $100 just to cross the GW?
Just to cross the GW. Yeah, man. Just to drive through the city. That's it.
Yeah, I guess that's worth it, but still, man, damn.
It can be a pain in the ass, especially if you're delivering there. I've done a few deliveries in Queens and places like that, and gotten turned around and all kinds of mixed up bass backwards, and end up on streets I'm not supposed to be on, and having to back up for 6 blocks at 2:00 in the morning. It's not fun if you get turned around in there.
Well, it's funny. It's funny you should say that, because I did a podcast with Bird, and he's up in Queens. And one of the things we talked about was how, I forget what the guy's name is who designed the roads in New York City, but he designed them like that. He designed them specifically so that you would get turned around in certain neighborhoods. Like it was really impossible to get into some richer neighborhoods, because they wanted to keep poor people out, to the point where they designed roads to, you could only drive to a certain point, and then you would either have to get out and walk, or you'd have to take a bus or something like that.
Oh, geez.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, and apparently Denver's actually was designed that way as well.
No doubt. No. Oh man. Yeah, I haven't been inside Denver city limits. I've driven, past Denver and through Denver, but never really dealt with inside their city. So I'm not really familiar with the ins and outs of their roads.
Do you realize the irony of 2 libertarian ANCAPs starting out talking about roads?
Yeah, it actually, I was just thinking about that. Maybe we should move on.
And it's a subject we should know nothing about. We hate roads. So.
Well, I think we're forced to, because it's such an unpopular opinion to be anarchist or voluntarist. It's such an unpopular opinion in today's society that you have to know something about everything, or you can't stand up for what you actually believe in.
Yeah.
Most people look at me and I got long hair and a long beard, and I look as far from professional or educated as anybody. And I know more about how the government runs than 90% of the people I know. And I have no choice. It's the only way I can defend my position.
Yeah. And you're, by knowing all that, you're safer than most people. You know how to keep yourself safe. You know how to avoid conflict, especially some of the most dangerous conflict. That's a very important thing to know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You bring up ANCAP, and here's something I actually was dying to talk to you about. You hear, the Michael Malices of the world, say, I'm straight anarchist. I don't, claim ANCAP. I kind of lean in his direction on that subject, where I tend to say I'm an anarchist. I don't really say I'm an ANCAP. And I think it's because a lot of people listen to the way we approach subjects, or that we talk about things, and they think that we're trying to push capitalism on them. And what I want people to understand is that I don't want to push any agenda on anybody. I want you to have your society and your community and figure it out on your own. And I just want to be left alone. Like, that's my main thing, is just leave me alone. I don't really care what you do, as long as you're not infringing on my rights and my ability to live my life the way I choose. Why do you choose to keep the capitalist moniker in the title ANCAP?
Probably more than anything out of just habit. Calling yourself an anarcho-capitalist for so long that it's kind of hard. But no, I do understand depending on who I'm talking to, if somebody's, knows I'm a libertarian or something like that, and starts going, and especially face to face, and they start going into sarcasm and things like that, I'll be like, oh, I'm not only a libertarian, I'm an anarchist. And then I'll just let them assume whatever they want. But I think because economics is so important, understanding economics, and, you don't have to be a master. You don't have to. If you've read Economics in One Lesson by Hazlitt 3, 4, or 5 times, I try to read it once a year. You're more solid than 99% of the world in economics, as far as I'm concerned. I guess the only reason I hold on to the ANCAP is just so that people realize that maybe because so they know where I'm coming from from an economic standpoint, so we really don't have to have that conversation. It seems like once the people who are running around calling themselves communists or anarcho-communists, anarcho-syndicalists, it seems like whenever they start talking, or if they find out you're an ANCAP, they don't want to engage you in questions about economics. They just want to engage you with straw men. I was thinking about this before we went on, and one of the things that really upsets me more than anything is this. And it wasn't really so much lately, but like up to about a year ago, it was like people were always bringing up, whenever you mention you're an anarchist, they would always bring up pedophilia, and they'd be like, oh, you just want to fuck kids, and it's like, I didn't even talk. I haven't mentioned anything sexual. All the memes I put up, I don't mention anything sexual. I never talk about anything sexual. Why would you look? And it's like, if you have a problem, if you're bringing this up, it must be on your mind, so, it's maybe the reason I want to call myself an ANCAP is so that people can talk about economics and don't talk about stupid shit like that. That everybody wants to talk about cultural stuff, and, and I don't know why I thought about that, but, thinking about that an hour ago, but I was just thinking about stuff that was, infuriating to me, because, I go over arguments in my head all the time that, if I talk to somebody and, they want to have a debate or something like that, I want to be ready for everything. I want to have every argument that they could possibly have, that they could possibly come up with, and I want to be able to shoot it down as quick as possible. So I constantly come up with arguments in my head, and it just popped into my head that, like, a year ago, especially on Facebook, that was one of the things that there was, like, it almost seemed like a group got together in a private room and said, okay, we're going to go out and call all the ANCAPs pedophiles. And it comes up every once in a while and everything, but I don't know. Just calling myself an ANCAP, it steers people more towards economics and away from stupid crap. And if people want to talk about economics, I can pretty much smash them all day. I had someone on Twitter today, talking about how bad the healthcare system is, and I said, just get rid of all the regulations, turn it into a free market, and in 10 years. The poorest person right now will have the same level of health care that an average 1%er has right now. And the person came back at me and said, yeah, but healthcare is a free market right now. And I'm just like, this is the level of stupid I have to deal with.
Yeah.
So it's like, if it's not somebody coming up with some outrageous off the wall thing that has, a literal straw man. People love to use the term straw man, and they have no idea what straw man is. I mean, it's really literally just misrepresenting an argument, and a gross misrepresentation. But for somebody to, I'd rather talk all day to somebody who has who's woefully ignorant on the healthcare system in the United States, and somebody who's just throwing out baseless accusations that they're making up. They're apparently is infesting their mind.
Well, you bring up economics, and economics is a good shifting point into the crypto world, because it's all related. How does somebody who's interested in getting away from the current economic system and not being enslaved to the way that the Federal Reserve is running things, how does the cryptocurrencies of today, whether it's what is it, Zen Cash or Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of these, assist somebody in finding in practically applying an ANCAP philosophy into their life?
Well, the first thing I would say about, if you're considering, how does cryptocurrency do that? Well, cryptocurrency has privacy to it. That's the most important thing about cryptocurrency, is you just have a level of privacy that you don't have when you're dealing in the fiat world. I sell my books on Amazon. I also sell my books through my website for cryptocurrency. I would much rather everybody who wants to buy my books do it through my website. Because, as soon as I make a sale through Amazon knows about it. They report it. People are charged tax for it. I mean, the tax doesn't go through me, to me, but Amazon does it, gets it. The first thing you need to understand about cryptocurrency is the privacy level, but you really need a basic knowledge of cryptocurrency before. I guess you don't need you need some knowledge in cryptocurrency before you start using it. Where to get it, the best way to get it, cheapest place to get it, what it is. And what it is really important. And as we were talking before you started recording, when you listen to cryptocurrency podcasts, most of the people talking about cryptocurrency on podcasts are people who've been in the cryptocurrency world for multiple years. And they've gotten past the point where they can do basics, where everything you turn it on and they're talking about scaling, and they're talking about block size, and they're talking about confirmation times. And to somebody who's brand new to it, this isn't really important. What's really important is to really understand exactly what it is. And right now, I just want to look up real quick. I had somebody on my podcast. So we did a cryptocurrency 101, and it's episode 120 of my podcast, Free Man Beyond the Wall. And it's Derek McGill, and he's the founder of the Nakatomo Studies Institute. And it's basically just a primer on Bitcoin, because Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency, and the blockchain. So if you go to episode 120, listen to that. I think it's an hour, or maybe an hour and 5 minutes. And all we talk about is cryptocurrency in the beginning. And then we get into some other stuff that's happening now, which may be a little more advanced, but I really tried to keep it as basic as possible. And once you understand exactly what it is, then you need to get some. Most of the time when people first get it, they buy it. They go to places like Coinbase. And I did the same thing. I did it through Coinbase, but, and then if I wanted something that wasn't Bitcoin or something they sold on Coinbase, because on Coinbase, I believe they only sell 4 coins right now. There's another trading platform like Bittrex, where you can send Bitcoin or Ethereum, and you can buy other coins. But I think the way to do cryptocurrency now is you got to try and earn it. So if you have a business, advertise that you you accept cryptocurrency. You accept Bitcoin. Bitcoin Cash is a good one because it's very large, very, very easy and fast transactions. Dash is the same way. Zencash is extremely private. They're what you would call a privacy coin. If you have an online business, go to something like coinpayments.net, and you can set up your cart to accept cryptocurrency with like 100 different cryptocurrencies. I accept 8 for my book. It's 8 that I've specifically put out there that I know people have, and the ones that I like. And if you own your own business, if you have an online platform, a store or something, I would say earn it, man. I've sold a lot of books on Amazon. I've sold nowhere near that many on my website, but I'm almost to the point in just selling my books for cryptocurrency for like 2 months now of getting the same amount of money as I've collected off of Amazon, because somebody else isn't getting a cut, and the cryptocurrency price fluctuates. So if somebody buys cryptocurrency, if somebody sends you cryptocurrency for your product, it could go up 10%, 20% in the next week. And there are platforms like, let me look one up right now, like BitPay, where you can send them your Bitcoin or your Bitcoin Cash, and you can buy directly off of Amazon from that app. So you're basically buying your goods, whatever you buy off of Amazon. I mean, I know people that buy their toilet paper, buy shampoo, basically do almost all of their shopping off of Amazon. If you have a flow of income coming in that's cryptocurrency, you can actually start using it, or you can, put it in a wallet on your phone. And if somebody's selling something, hey, do you accept cryptocurrency? And there's there's an app for Bitcoin Cash called Cointext, and my friend Vin Armani invented it. I have it on my phone, and it's through SMS text. You don't even have to have internet. You could use it as long as you can text. You can send money. My wife was asking me what it was, and I said, okay, I'll tell you exactly what it is. And I just got on and sent her a text, and I sent her $1 in Bitcoin Cash. And so, I've used that and sent it to BitPay and used it on Amazon. And I think Amazon very soon is going to start accepting cryptocurrency directly. What does this do? Well, it takes the Federal Reserve out of it, man. People talk about, a lot of people may have heard the term agorism, which is basically a black market, which is getting out of the system. People that deal weed, they're agorists. People that work under the table, they're agorists. People that aren't paying taxes, for their work. Like I said, people under the table, people who are doing stuff that's quote unquote illegal. You starve the system. And that's what it is. That's what it is, man. We have some gun websites where, gun forums here in Georgia where you can go on there, and if you have a gun to sell, you can put it out there. And as long as, and someone will be like, hey, I want it, let's meet up somewhere. And, you meet up in a nice public place. And, it's like private sales are legal here. You don't have to do any paperwork as long as you can. I always try to just make sure that they're a resident of the state. And whenever I put something on there in the last year and a half, I've advertised, I'll take your fiat currency, but I'd prefer to take Bitcoin Cash for the last 6 months, Ethereum, Litecoin, all of these things. It's basically setting up an underground economy, an economy that works below this economy that sucks so much of your wealth away and uses it to bomb little kids in other countries, and gives it to businesses that do abortions, or just gives it to people who gives it to people who don't want to work. I mean, I have no problem directly giving my money to people who are genuinely in need, but people who don't want to work, I don't want them to have my money. I don't want them to have what I've labored for. And it's a way for them just not to steal from you. I'm sure everybody listening to this who has a paycheck looks at that paycheck at the end of the week and goes, yeah, this isn't what I earned. This isn't what I agreed with my employer on. Me, a private individual, and my employer, a private individual, decided upon, I'm going to give this amount of time. They're going to pay me this. It's a contractual obligation. Well, who's this interloper? Who's this third party coming in and saying, no, you can't keep all of that. We're going to take it. And if you try to get around me taking it, we're going to throw you in a cage, and you're probably going to be raped. And they have a population that's been so brainwashed that they go, they make jokes about, ha ha ha, he's going to jail, he's going to be raped. What the fuck is wrong with people? Like I said, you say you're not going to release this for a couple months, but today's July 4th. July 4th, the symbolism behind July 4th is freedom. I think people like symbols of freedom way more, like the flag or July 4th or all this patriot crap. I think they love those symbols a whole lot more than they like freedom, because freedom is fucking dangerous, and people don't get it, man. That's why I love cryptocurrency, and the more I learn about it, and the more I get it, the more I see it not as a way that we're going to overthrow, or not overthrow. When I say overthrow, I'm not talking about taking up guns, but I mean basically sidestepping the system so much that they just lose their power and slowly lose their power, and they have to go away. So, man, I wish everybody would take cryptocurrency, and that's what, my buddy Vin's app Cointext, he just got $600,000 from a VC, from a venture capitalist, to now he's going to be able to onboard merchants with it and go into 44 different countries by the end of the year. So we can, I'll be able to write from my phone, write from a regular old text. If a buddy of mine's in the Czech Republic, needs some money, boom, all I got to do is go send, $250, put his address in it, hit send, hit a confirmation code that pops up, and boom, it'll be on his phone as quickly as a text will be sent there. He'll be able to send it to his wallet, and he'll be able to cash out and use that money, use it however he needs it.
Yeah, man. It's beyond convenient. It's true freedom, being able to do what you want with your money when you want to do it. And that's the way it really should be. And there's a lot there that you mentioned to unpack. Number one, when you were talking about the podcasters, that focus on crypto, there's one podcast I tried listening to. It was Unchained. And it was just all nuts and bolts. It was overwhelming. I was like, I don't even know what this lady's talking about. I have no idea. And everybody that I knew that was involved with crypto was like, this is the podcast you need to listen to. And I'm like, this podcast doesn't help me at all, because I don't know any more today than I did, before I contacted you and asked you about it. And I think that's a big mistake people are making, is they're getting way too technical with these things when this isn't a mainstream idea. And in order to get it into the mainstream, you're going to have to make it applicable to everyday life, where people can see the benefits day in and day out, and how they can use it. One of the things I was looking at are all the different types of wallets out there. And I'm like, oh, this doesn't make any sense to me. And then you got some people were like, well, you can do it straight from your phone. And then you read one blog and it's like, oh, never use your phone. And it's like, okay, so how do I know I'm secure in my, in my actions and in what I'm doing? How do I have any idea where I'm going with this and how I'm going to be able to use it, and if I'm even going to be able to teach my kids about it so that they have some idea. Where they're at the age now, they'll probably be teaching me about it. But I've sent them messages and asked them about it, and they're like, yeah, we don't really know much about it. And so it's not a mainstream idea as of yet.
Well, not yet. And here's the thing that people forget about this. It's 9 years old. This is technology that's 9 years old. If you look at the history, if you go back and you look at the origin of people starting to use paper money, they started doing it. The origin, they trace it back, I think, to the Orient. People didn't want anything to do with that. People didn't want to do anything with these pieces of paper that weren't worth anything. And you had all these factions, and that's what's going on right now. There are cryptocurrencies out there. I could think of like Zencash, Dash, and Bitcoin Cash that are very easy to use. I mean, there's the wallets, how fast you get confirmations on your transactions. But there are people out there, and a lot of people with what I call what's becoming called Bitcoin Core. Bitcoin was the first one, and there was a bunch of like offshoots of Bitcoin, and one of them is Bitcoin Cash. And Bitcoin Cash came about because a bunch of people saw that the people who had basically taken over Bitcoin were centralizing it. They didn't want to change anything about it. Do you have any? Do you know what a white paper is?
Yes.
Yeah. At any time, it's like a prospectus. When a mutual fund starts up, you get a prospectus. If somebody wants you to invest in their mutual fund, they'll give you a prospectus. It'll tell you exactly what it is, what the whole theory behind it is. And anytime a coin comes up, anytime a new coin comes out, there's a white paper, and it explains to you the whole theory behind it, and why it exists, basically. And the original Bitcoin white paper clearly says in the title that it was supposed to be electronic cash, peer-to-peer electronic cash. And some people in the Bitcoin Core community basically wanted to keep it more as a store of value, especially when they started seeing people invest thousands and thousands of dollars into it. And the Bitcoin Cash people were like, well, we want this to be something that, you can stand next to the person on the street and be able to, from a phone, from a tablet, be able to send somebody else, send the person standing next to you cash, and have it be really quick and have it be cheap to do, because, there are transaction fees, because there are people, what they call miners on the network, who are pushing basically pushing the transactions through and verifying them. So, right. So you have basically with this new technology that's 9 years old, and there are people that, the way I'm explaining it right now may sound, I could be making minor mistakes and everything, and because, like I said, I'm not an expert in this, and it's 9 years old. There really are no experts in it, but there are the philosophy of it is solid. That it's supposed to be for private transactions outside of the government.
Right. And
some people saw that some of the people in Bitcoin, either because of their ideology or because they wanted to protect how much they had, because it became so the price of it went up so much. There are some people in Bitcoin, the original Bitcoin, that are talking about trying to get the government involved and regulating it. And the people like Bitcoin Cash, people like Dash, people like Zencash, they're like, no friggin' way. The vision of this from the beginning has been that you're talking about how you go and you go on a board and you start hearing what people saying, oh, don't use this, don't use that, don't use this. You don't want it to be on your phone. You don't want to be. It's basically people who they've decided that this is supposed to only be used one way. this new technology, this technology that's literally 9 years old. You don't let a 9-year-old do anything, right? You don't put them in charge of anything. This technology is 9 years old. And people are, just like when paper cash came out, people are fighting over how it should be used. Me, I look at the creator, what he wrote, and I like it. It's a very libertarian document, the original white paper for Bitcoin, And I think it looks like Bitcoin Cash, and I think it looks like Dash. I think it looks like Zen Cash. So that's what I tend to go more towards, because it's very easy to do transactions. They happen fast and they're very cheap. But, so, I mean, I understand that, for someone who's getting into it, they start going on forums and you hear people saying, oh, don't use Bitcoin Cash. The guys who run Bitcoin Cash, they're cheats and they're crooks. It's like almost every single one of the people I've ever met that deals with Bitcoin Cash is an anarcho-capitalist, is an anarchist, is a voluntarist. I mean, almost all of them. I can't think of one that's not. And the big guys who promote it, the miners, people who are doing the mining, they all share the same ideology as me. And then I look at like the original Bitcoin, and I see people who are hardcore statists and say, yes, if you've had gains on Bitcoin, you should pay taxes on it. And I'm like, these aren't people that I want to, these aren't people that I want anything to do with. So, I tend to follow my ideology, but you have to understand, right now, just like in the dawn of currency, people are fighting over it because it's so young, because it's so new. But I'm not really, I'm looking at what it's going to do 10, 20, 30 years, even see what it could possibly do to free us from this, from this slavery of the government, and we haven't talked about this, but the government is just pure slavery. I mean, think about it. You're walking down the street, you're doing nothing wrong, and a cop pulls up to you and goes, stop. But you've done nothing wrong. What are you going to do?
You're just supposed to
What happens
obey.
if you don't stop?
Yeah.
What if you don't stop?
Yeah.
What if you? So right. Land of the free, right? Land of the free. Today's July 4th. But if a cop stops me and I'm walking down the street, if I run to grab a pack of smokes at the end of the street, and I'm walking, minding my own business, not doing anything, and a cop pulls up next to me and says, "Stop, get on your knees." Well, he's just turned me into a fucking porn star. Now he's telling me to stop, get on my knees. Well, what's next? What do you want? What do I do next? Do you want me to sit? Do you want me to? Am I supposed to suck something now? Why? Because people are such cowards. They're scared of their next door neighbor, so they give rights to these people and give them a costume and give them a gun. Rights that you don't have to kidnap people. I mean, it's remarkable what people don't think about, and especially on a day like today, when, to me, July 4th is just friggin' hilarious that there's all these people out there celebrating it, and they're just slaves, and in their mind, they're slaves. Now, there were slaves on the plantation back in the day, who they weren't slaves because their minds were free. They knew they just couldn't get out of this situation right now. But there were slaves who were like, hey, we have it good here. Why would we want to go out there? If we want to go out there, who knows how we're going to eat? Master lets us eat here. We always have food. We have to work, but we always have food. But, it's that dangerous. It's that, what I said before, freedom is dangerous, man. People just...
Absolutely, and it takes a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, and people don't want responsibility. You can just look at our culture, and people are not... people are not enamored with responsibility at all.
Absolutely. And like one of the things I thought of when starting this podcast was I listened to Unregistered a lot, the Thaddeus Russell's podcast.
Yeah.
And he talks about I don't know if you've read his book Renegade History of the United States, but he talks about a lot of the different definitions of freedom and how different people define freedom in different ways, whether it's freedom from responsibility or as an ANCAP, typically, from my assumption, at least the way I look at it, looks at freedom as if I were born in nature, what would I be able to do to survive? Like, where would be my limits? And my limits would end where your freedoms begin and where your life begins, and that's kind of the way I look at it. And I don't think people are able to look at freedom in that way because they believe that government is supposed to provide security. And so when you get down into the philosophical side of anarchism and things of this nature, it just, they can't wrap their heads around it. They have no idea. I saw a post the other day where someone had said that people only hate Trump because some of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard, and one of which was he's a conservative Christian. I'm like, he's not, but whatever. I'm not even going to remark on that. I don't hate Trump. I despise the office he holds. And the next response I got, and you could probably guess, oh, what, you'd rather a dictator? Because that's the center of our Constitution. Well, number one, if you know about anything about the Constitution, that's not the center of it. Number two, it's not ours because I had nothing to do with it. And number three, I don't need a leader. And that was just kind of my response to it. And they're like, well, countries do. And I'm like, well, I disagree on many levels. And if you want to get into that, we can go on further. They never responded, obviously, because they don't want to get into it because they don't want their core beliefs to be challenged.
Right. And that's,
go ahead.
That's like, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I did.
No. You're good. Go ahead.
I did a very controversial podcast this past weekend. Basically, I said that if you are an anarcho-capitalist or a voluntarist, you cannot hold the position that government borders are legitimate. Now, there has been an argument going around for a couple years, and especially came up in the age of Trump. I mean, it's always been a debate, but it hasn't become this heated. And I had when I made the announcement that the podcast was out, and I don't know what you think. I don't, if we talked about it now, we'd probably talk about it for an hour. So, but I have a podcast out there that has all the arguments for why I think that if you're an anarcho-capitalist or you're a voluntarist, you can't endorse you can't endorse public borders. I endorse private borders, but I also understand that private borders has to do with private ownership. And as long as a government exists, you don't own shit. You don't own your house because even after you pay it off, you have to pay property tax on it. You don't own your car because there are certain things you can do where the state can take it away from you. You don't own your money because the government can take your money away from you. So you don't own yourself because the government can take your life away from you. So, I made these arguments. And 5 minutes after I released it and made the announcement, people were coming at me and attacking me for it. And it was, and I said, you haven't listened to it. And the only reason you haven't listened to it is because you're scared. You're scared that I'm going to make arguments that you can't refute. You don't want to have your worldview changed. And these are people who call themselves ANCAPs or, anarcho-capitalists or voluntarists. We're supposed to be some of the most open-minded people who listen to arguments, who don't judge people in groups, but judge people as individuals. And, they were coming after me 5 minutes after this hit, and it's an hour and 5 minute podcast. So they didn't listen to anything. And it's just like you said, they did not want to have their worldview changed, or most of them feel like they're being attacked. And it's no different than the social justice warriors on a campus who put their fingers in their ear and go, la, 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 dee, da, I need a safe space. I don't want to hear this.
Right.
So
yeah, well, number one, you're the first podcast I ever heard of yours. You were doing something on Rothbard. I believe it was conservatism is not libertarianism. Is that correct?
Yeah,
what it was titled?
libertarianism is not conservatism.
Yeah, and that was my first exposure to you. You and I had been friends on Twitter or following each other on Twitter, but I didn't know you had a podcast until I had heard you on Part of the Problem, and then I was like, oh crap, he has a podcast too, and it's my fault because I'm not on Twitter very much. I get on Twitter, I check yours, I check you, I check Michael Malice, I check out what Scott Horton's doing, and then I get off Twitter. I just don't really like Twitter that much. It's like whatever.
It really is a cesspool.
So every now and then I'll tweet something up there, and nobody has anything to say because most of the people that follow me are authors, and they're just like, what is this guy talking about? Whatever. But I posted that on Facebook, and it was the same type of response that you got to this last one. It was the first thing. I had this guy who's kind of like I guess you would call it a conservatarian, more like a Glenn Beck style. And he was like, this is why I don't like libertarian thought, and I won't listen to this podcast. And I'm like, yeah, but the title doesn't do anything but provoke you. You haven't even listened to what his arguments are, and maybe the arguments are worth listening to. And I never understood. Well, I can't say I never understood that, because there was a time, that I was locked in, this past election actually. And, I'm actually admitting this, and it's kind of embarrassing, but this past election, I was all about, Ted Cruz over Donald Trump, because I was like, this guy is at least understands what the Constitution says. I don't even know if Donald Trump can say Constitution, and that was kind of like my whole argument behind it. And living in Texas, you see that a lot of what Ted Cruz has said, he stands by, and he stood to his word. But then you start looking at what he said and what he's standing by, and you're like, oh wait, this doesn't promote freedom in any way, shape, or form. What the hell is wrong with me? And so I've evolved a lot since that election cycle. And it was due to, and I told Scott Horton this on Twitter one time, it was due to actually having a phone conversation with Austin Peterson when he was running for the Libertarian candidate for president. And he was calling potential voters and actually, spending 20, 30 minutes on the phone with them and talking with them. And he made some comments about the foreign policy and about immigration and this, that, and the other, that I was just like, I never looked at it that way. And it really made me think, and it made me start to look into things. And it wasn't like they say, the difference between a libertarian and an anarchist is about 6 months. It took no time. I was just like, it took me a little time it took me no time to wrap my head around it philosophically. It took me, and it took me a few months to figure out, okay, it can be done, and it took a little bit of listening to Bob Murphy talk about it, on the Tom Woods show. And I was like, got it. I got this. I see how it works now. But people aren't willing to challenge themselves. That their education ended when the government told them they graduated. And that's the way they look at it. And they're afraid. I don't know if they're afraid or lazy or it's too much, because there's so much going on in today's society where they won't talk about these things, and they won't go out and look for other opinions and validate their own opinion. Prove yourself right. Go out and listen to somebody else and prove yourself right. And if you can't prove yourself right, then you got to start questioning, okay, why do I believe what I believe? Is it actually valuable? Is it actually moving forward, my life? Why am I clinging to this like a religion and don't want it to be challenged? And it gets kind of scary when you realize, like with me, it wasn't that long ago I was like that. And I was all about, yeah, we should be bombing these guys and killing these guys. And then I was like, started looking into it, and I started listening to Scott Horton specifically. And I was like, wait a second, why should we be killing these guys? Like, they're just guys. Oh, well, when they were the other, it was easy to imagine them dead. But now that they're just people, oh, well, it's not so easy.
Yeah, it's, I think you're pretty lucky though. If you drive a truck, you get a good amount of time to think, and you probably listen to a lot of podcasts and maybe some books on some books on audio, and you have time to think. And I'm the same way. I work a lot of hours, but I also have a lot of time to think, and I think that's pretty rare nowadays. People don't want their beliefs challenged. I've fiddled with anarcho-communism. I've fiddled with anarcho-syndicalism. I can't make it work. It won't work. Communism, socialism, it won't work. You could put a democratic in front of it, and that's just voting. I think I put it on Twitter today. That's just voting for your own gulag. Is voting to see which ghetto you're going to live in. All that doesn't work. The safety nets don't work. Social safety nets. Words like that. I mean, just words that came out of the progressive era. I mean, all this stuff, it just doesn't work. And the only way it's going to work is that if we, using modern technology, living in the modern world, but going back to that reality of only you can take care of yourself, having voluntary interactions with other people that you deem to be important, what Mises would call human action, praxeology, and people that can't, the people, the unfortunate people that can't provide for themselves, family needs to start stepping in. Charities need to start stepping in. I mean, people act like if there was no government, no one would give charity. Well, I mean, the government's not a charity. They're the worst. I mean, and most of the charities now are just little governments. So much of that money, I think of the Red Cross, like 8% of what goes to the Red Cross actually goes to help people. But I mean, people forget who started the hospitals in this country. They were churches, the colleges. They did it all with funds that were, that they took in that were voluntary. And we can go back to that. I'll even take, let's get it down to the point where, foreign, protect us from foreign invaders and take care of the roads. Let's get it down to that point, and then I'll show you through the writings of Bob Murphy and Walter Block and people like that how we don't even need those two things. But let's get it down to the other two things. Okay, I'll make that. I'll make that deal with everyone. Let's just get it down to those two things, and then and then you'll understand. Oh, we don't even need these two things. Oh. Yeah, let's just do that. Let's give that a shot. Let's give freedom a shot. Let's give individuality. Let's give individual liberty a shot. That 5 years that we had after the end of the Revolutionary War, where people relied on voluntary interactions to get things done, and things were looking really good. I mean, it's been done. It's been done, but a government will always seek to empower itself and grow itself and to enrich itself. And it can only do that at the expense of other people.
Wasn't that a quote attributed to Franklin? That government's natural tendency is to grow and liberty's natural tendency is to shrink?
No, I don't know who that was attributed to, but I haven't heard that in a while. Actually, I haven't heard that quote in a while. That's a good one.
Yeah, I can pull back. My brain soaks up some weird things, man. So, but you're right. Yeah, I do listen to a lot of podcasts. I actually get a lot less time to read, and my libertarianism wasn't, unlike a lot of people, it didn't come from reading Rothbard or Murphy or all these guys. It came from listening to podcasts and diving into, and I think the first time that I realized like anarchism was like actually like possible, I was listening to Judge Napolitano give a speech at the Mises Institute, and somebody said to him, "You sound like an anarchist." And he's like, "I'm not denying anything." And I was like, "Hold up. This is a guy I really respect. Like, hold on. Like, let me look into this a little bit deeper. You know, like, I don't know what I'm talking about apparently, because this guy is obviously much more educated on how government works than I am." So that's what really turned me towards the more anarchist point of view, was when he said that little phrase, "You don't hear me denying anything." And I was like, okay, I see.
I've watched that video too, and
I've watched it so many times.
It's very telling. You know, he even talks about how in Jersey, some of the courts have been privatized, and people prefer to do business in the private courts.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, think about it. Michael Malice always talks about, you know, when if you buy something from Macy's and it's defective, and you go back to Macy's, you don't get the government involved. There's some kind of arbitration that goes on right there. You get it taken care of. How often does anybody call the police or get the government involved or seek to sue? Unless they're like psychopaths or something like that. You know, there's always a way that it gets taken care of. And Macy's doesn't do it because they think that you're going to call the cops or you're going to do this. They do it because they want to make money, and it's in their best interest to keep you happy.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the basis of capitalism. You know, that's the basis of commerce.
Right.
Is you want to get rich.
Right.
So you provide a service. You provide something. And if people want it, they will give you a piece of their hard-earned labor in order to get it.
Right.
Just got to keep them happy, and they'll keep coming back.
Exactly. There was a lot in that speech that Napolitano gave that was just incredible, and it leads you down such different paths. Like it just expounds upon the way you can think about things. When he's talking about the Bunny Ranch in Vegas shut down because the government couldn't even serve liquor and hookers to truckers, you know, I mean, things of that nature. And he's like, yeah, and you want these people taking care of your health care, you know, and things of that, like that. But I want to shift gears here just a little bit. We're almost an hour in, and I want to talk to you about your books. You seem to be focusing with Freedom Through Memedom and The Kids Are Not All Right. You seem to be focusing a lot on the younger generations. And I really appreciate that, because these are books I can refer to my kids. You know, my youngest son is 13 and my oldest is 20. So I can get these books in front of them. And it seems like you're focusing on these generations. What led, like, libertarians are known as heartless creatures that are only after their own self-interest. What is it that makes you care so much about the younger generation's freedom and spreading these principles so that future generations can live a free life?
Well, you said it. I mean, if we can bring up if we can get every teenager right now thinking about freedom, thinking about liberty, and really questioning the government at every turn, to get them this young, questioning the government, and to the point where they're asking that question. The whole point of my first book, Freedom Through Memedom, was I wanted people by the end of that book, by day 31, if they took it as a 31-day study guide as I wrote it, but I also wrote it so that people could read it all at once if they wanted to. But by the time you get to the end of that book, I either wanted you to be an anarchist or I wanted you to throw it. I wanted you. I wanted either one of those.
You wanted a visceral reaction.
That's exactly what I wanted, and that's what I've gotten. That's everybody who's talked to me about reading it. That's what they've gotten. Mm-hmm. Is you get a real reaction about it, and if you're an anarchist at the end of it, then I achieved my goal. Mm-hmm. If you throw it at the end of it, you could. I'm thinking that you can be an anarchist soon. I'm thinking that you could. I'm thinking that you're really thinking about this, because if you made it all the way through and you did, and it gave you that kind of reaction, the person who reads it and reads the first 2 pages and is just like and throws this aside, mm-hmm. Hopefully they'll go back to it. Hopefully they'll go back to it at another time.
Right.
There is nothing there, but I started it off by day 3. By the 6th page of that book, I wanted people to realize that the government is illegitimate. Mm-hmm. That that somebody has given them the power to do things that you can't.
Yeah.
And that makes no sense. It's illogical. If I can't go to my neighbor and demand 30% of his paycheck on Friday, I can't appoint somebody and say, okay, I want you to take an oath, take this Halloween costume, put this shiny piece of metal on your chest, and here's a gun. Now I'm giving you the ability to go steal 30% of my neighbor's income, not realizing you're also giving him the ability to steal 30% of your income. Right. But that's illogical. How can you give somebody a right that you don't have? If you can,
it's the old adage: the government is granted authority by the consent of the governed.
Is that 100%? And how?
No, I'm saying you're trying to show them that this is the scenario we're led to believe. Government is supposed to be granted authority by the consent of the governed, yet they have authority nobody can give them, because it's not authority anybody has to act upon other people.
Right. You would never give your next door neighbor that. You would never give your next door neighbor that power. But somehow,
right.
Some way,
you don't have the power to give them.
Right. And it's like it's like someone said, I can't remember who said it, that right now we live in anarchy. There just happens to be this gang of thieves, this mob, and when I say mob, I'm talking about like mafia, that has basically stepped in and taken control, and by force. I mean, government is force. Yeah. They don't get it. The reason they have more guns, more powerful weapons than we do is because they control us. They rule over us. They reign over us. Well, how did we get there? I mean, are people such cowards that they need to give that they need to give rights that they don't have to other people? It's almost like I mean, people say if there was no government, warlords would take over. Well, at least you would know that they're warlords, because you do not understand right now that you're basically bending over for a warlord. You're basically saying, well, you're protecting us. You have this good protection racket going. So, do what you must. Just protect us. And they have no mandate to protect you. I mean, their own courts have said they have no mandate to protect you. Local police, anybody. So it's illogical that anybody would want this, would desire this. I would rather live under a warlord, because they would be dealing with so many people that they'd get around to me every 6 or 7 months. That's better than every week or every day. Yeah, I mean,
they wouldn't have an entire education system brainwashing the civilization to believe that they were legitimate either.
Yeah, I mean, the mafia, yeah, that's the difference between the government and the mafia. The mafia doesn't have friggin' a 16-year education plan or a 12-year education plan for free. That, a 12-year free education plan so that they can brainwash you into thinking that they're there to protect you and they're there to provide everything for you.
Right,
yeah.
right.
If the mafia had that, they'd be a government.
So when you sat down to write it, your goal was to convert as many people as possible, obviously. But again, it goes back to that whole adage that people somehow believe that libertarians are selfish. Like, how did you find it within your libertarian self to think of others? And to think that maybe others should be free as well.
Well, that's in my own. It's self-interest. Yeah, and that's another thing of economics is people act in their own self-interest. The more people,
well, that's the whole.
Yeah. The more people that I get to call themselves an anarchist, to think of the government the way I do, the better chance I have in this lifetime of achieving some level of freedom. A much better level of freedom than I have right now. So I didn't do this for other people. First and foremost, I did it for myself. I knew I knew I wasn't going to get rich doing this. Writing this book, unless a million people decided they wanted to read this book. And I knew that I knew that wasn't going to happen. I knew that wasn't going to happen. So it wasn't about, money was 10th, 11th, 12th reason for writing it. But the number one, 95% of the reason for this is me wanting more people to think like I do. And I know that sounds horrible. Oh, he just wants me to think like me. I just want you to desire freedom. I really don't care. It's like if somebody read this book and decided, oh, okay, I hate, I don't want the government to have power over me, but still I'm a communist. Okay, well, can we work together to get rid of, or I'm an anarcho-communist. Can we at least work together to get rid of this Leviathan, and then, we can go our separate ways? Because I don't want to build a libertarian dictatorship where I force everybody to be, live under the system. We can split up. We can have our own communities. We can trade. As long as you don't aggress against me, I won't aggress against, there'll be no violence from my side. I don't care. I just,
what you really want to say is you're a communist. I got a helicopter out back you need to take a look at.
Man, we talked. I forget what we talked about on. I think it was the last podcast talking about borders, where we were laughing because this whole. We got to throw commies out of helicopters. And where did that come from? Pinochet, a CIA puppet dictator.
Right.
So, to worship Pinochet is to worship the CIA, basically. So.
Yeah, well, that would be another 3-hour conversation. I would have to start the Joe Rogan podcast to get into talking into CIA and all that crap, man. Some of the things that people accept as norms nowadays just blow my mind, especially with all the documents that have been declassified over the last, 15 years or so.
Yeah, and no one wants to read them.
Well, when you still to this day, you tell somebody, well, the Gulf of Tonkin didn't happen. They're like, what? What are you talking about? You're like, come on, man. Like, seriously, if you want to have these arguments, if you want to have these discussions, at least pay some attention to some of the information that's being released,
and they don't want to do that.
Well, and then everybody wonders why you don't believe the story. No matter what the story is, you don't believe it, and it's like, well, how can I believe anything you say? Like, how can I believe anything, And you go down a list of things, and then they want to defend. Well, there were weapons of mass destruction. Oh, you mean those ones that were outdated that the United States had buried there in the 90s? Like, what are you talking about? So.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he had he was working on he was working on weapons of mass destruction under his house.
Right.
Yeah, they said that he was doing it under his palaces. Yeah. Oh, because that's exactly where I'd want to work on fissionable material is in my basement.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is, people
I want to be
retarded.
the first to go.
Yeah, people are retarded.
I agree. All right, man. Well, hey, man, we're over an hour into it. I think we've covered pretty much anything. Go ahead and plug anything you got to plug, Bubba.
Please listen to my podcast, Free Man Beyond the Wall. Yeah, I mean, I know that you're going to be releasing this in a couple months, but once you hear this, go back and listen to episode 125, which I'll be recording in 2 days. I'm going to have Dr. Ron Paul on.
Nice.
And yeah, I'm not going to have a great deal of time to talk to him, but yeah, I'm going to talk to him about some foreign policy stuff, talk about we'll talk about fiscal policy, and then I'm going to ask him one specific question I always wanted to ask him about the 2007 debates where, you know, he said the reason they hate us because we're over there, and then Rudy Giuliani attacked him, and basically everybody on the stage attacked him. And it was at that moment that I became a libertarian, and 6 months later I became an anarchist because of Ron Paul. And
I remember talking to my dad about that when it happened. And my dad goes, you know, he seems like he's got the right ideas, but I don't think he understands foreign policy. And I wasn't familiar with anything libertarian at the time. The closest I had ever gotten to libertarian was reading a Glenn Beck book. And I was just like, oh, okay, Dad, if you say so. And now I'm like, oh my God, I should have kicked him right in the twat when he said that.
Yeah, so you know, Ron really shaped. I've actually met him, and he probably won't remember this, but I actually had a meal with him. But so I'll be talking to him, and you know, I just had Bob Murphy on. I've had Tom Woods on. I've been on Dave Smith's show, and I hope to have him on my show very soon. And you know, I just have, you know, and even I have people on that a lot of people haven't heard of, and you know, we get into these great conversations about just the philosophy of liberty, and that's what I try to concentrate on. I do have a tendency to really rail against local police and state police a lot, of course, and the ATF and FBI, of course, which is one of my pet peeves is how many people I know that hate the ATF and the FBI but respect state and local police, not realizing that they're the same thing. Mm-hmm. You know, but you know, so my podcast and my books, Freedom Through Memedom and The Kids Are Not All Right, they're available on Amazon, my website, freemanbeyondthewall.com/store for cryptocurrency. I love seeing people use cryptocurrency. So I really, when I see I've sold books on Amazon, it's really nice. When I see people using cryptocurrency, it really gets me excited. So, and you know, that's really it. I'll be talking at Liberty Forum in New Hampshire in February. I still haven't picked the topic yet, but that's a 3-day conference in New Hampshire. It's their winter conference, and I think they're going to be talking a lot about privatizing services and how even right now with the state existing, how we can work on privatizing certain services. So that's something I look forward to, and by the time this comes out, that will start. By September, there'll be that you'll start seeing ads all over Twitter and Facebook for Liberty Forums. So yeah, that's what I got going on.
That sounds awesome, man. And yes, do check out his podcast. It's one of the best podcasts out there. I listen every week. He generally releases 2 podcasts a week. I usually have time to listen to one and try to catch up on the other during the weekend. And I really enjoy Mance Rayder. He's great on Twitter. And I still need to check out your books, man. I keep telling you it's on my list of 285,000 books I have to read. And I will get to them, I promise.
I'll give you a list of books to read before mine. That's the way I am. People are like, you know, I'll always be like, anyone should read my first book. But, my second book is great if you're very interested in the culture and especially what's going on college campuses. But, if people ask me, they're like, man, I want to read your books, but I got so many other books. I'm like, yeah, go read Scott Horton's book, Fool's Errand, before you read mine. I want you to read that. Please, go read that. Ignore mine for the time being. Go read that, or Bob Murphy's Choice. Go read that,
Yeah.
So, yeah. But, what I will say is if you have children, teenagers, people getting ready to go off to college, both of my books that's what I was writing for. I was writing for young people. And, I think that it's so important that, especially in 2007, seeing how many young people were turned to liberty by Ron Paul and his movement, where you had 19 and 20-year-old kids chanting "End the Fed." That was that's one of the most amazing things that I've ever seen in my life. Right. Man, it's all about getting the young people to thinking about liberty and really questioning anything the government is doing, questioning everything the government's doing. So, well, even check out the podcast, check out the books.
Even if you are into government, you should be questioning them all. Because it's not you making the decision. You should be at least questioning where these decisions are being made, why they're being made the way they're being made. It's just intellectually, it's intellectually impotent to just go along,
The average person, and you saw this through the Obama years, through the Bush years. During the Bush years, people on the left were anti-war. Obama got into office, continued the wars, even started some other wars, and the left became anti-war, and they stopped talking about it. Now Trump, now Trump gets in. Trump ran on, we need to stop these foreign wars. We have no reason to be there. He becomes president, and the people who are following him aren't holding him to that either.
Right.
Because, everybody's distracted by North Korea and what could be done in North Korea, not realizing that the military is fighting in Syria, that what's going on in Libya, what's going on, the horror show that Yemen is, the CIA training Ethiopian troops to invade Somalia. All these countries that, Syria being the absolute worst, still bombing Iraq. Still bombing Afghanistan. Afghanistan, the biggest clusterfuck that we've ever seen in the history of this country. And, QAnon. That's what I'm relying on. QAnon. Fucking, these people are so, you get into this camp, you choose a side, and then when your side's in power, you don't question what they do.
Close your eyes and go along for the ride.
That is American politics in a nutshell, and that's why nothing ever changes.
I'm sure tomorrow I'm going to get an earful about foreign policy. I'm interviewing Scott Horton in the morning, so that's going to be fun. I'm going to enjoy that one.
Beautiful. Jeez. I've had him on my podcast 4 or 5
I've heard
times.
Every one of them.
Someone with that level of knowledge. You just ask a good question and let him go, and you just listen and learn. There are very few of my own podcasts that I listen back to. I listen to every Scott Horton one at least 3 or 4 times.
And he's so humble too. For as much knowledge and as smart as he is, he's such a humble person. Every message I get from him, it's just self-degrading. I'm like, dude, you're fine. You're great. I don't understand. So.
Yeah, he and we talk. We've talked whenever we do a call. We talk on Skype. We always for like a half hour before and a half hour after. We've gotten to the point where we talk on the phone, and the guy is just. He's one of the nicest people, man. And I will do anything for him, and I will defend him. Against anybody who comes against him. I have blocked people on Twitter because they have gone after Scott Horton. I just don't. I don't have time for people like that. Yeah, I don't have time for people who don't understand that he's been anti-war for over 20. He's been doing anti-war podcasts and shows for over 20 years.
Well, and even if you disagree with him, he's not the type of person you attack on a personal level. He's such a, why can't we just all just chill out and figure this out together? You know, that's kind of the way he comes across. He doesn't come across as, offensive in any way, shape, or form, And it's just one of those things that's just remarkable. When people hear things they don't want to hear, they take it as a personal attack, and then they retaliate personally. And it's like, this isn't the guy you should be retaliating against in a personal manner.
Yeah. He has liberals on his show. He has conservatives on his show. He has anarchists on his show. I mean, he has people who have no ideology, as long as they're anti-war and they want to they want to do something to end these wars. I mean, he's not someone like me who has a tendency to to retreat to liberty. I just want to be around. I have this tendency where I want to put myself in a corner and just be around people who are liberty minded. But I understand. I'm not going to learn anything. I'm not going to influence people by doing that, which is a reason why I go on Twitter and I do as much as I do on Facebook. Is I've had people, I get DMs all the time on Twitter and in Facebook, saying, man, I wasn't an anarchist until I started, really following you, and, hearing stories like that. People don't do that publicly. Mm-hmm. They do it privately. And hearing stories like that always just makes me feel good, because, it lets me know that this isn't all for naught. This isn't the amount of time I spend doing this, and, the books and the podcasts. If there were no results happening, I would still do it. But man, I'd be a frustrated, bitter person. But knowing that, I'm making at least a little bit of a difference just makes me feel good. It really does, And like I said, it's self-interest, man. Hopefully coming down the line, we'll start seeing more people talking about tearing this government back all the way.
Absolutely, man. And you're one of my favorites out there. I just want to reiterate to everybody listening, freemanbeyondthewall.com and Freeman Beyond the Wall podcast. That's Mance Rayder. You've been listening to Stranger Encounters. I'm Tommy Salmons. Late.